Can a $199 launch monitor actually be any good? That is what we are finding out today with one of the most hyped golf tech products of 2026, the ShotScope LM1. I've spent a bunch of time with this, I've put it through its paces, and today I'm going to share with you the things that I like, the things that I don't, and help you figure out if this thing's any good and if you should buy it. So if you're in the market for a budget launch monitor, keep watching. Today's video is for you. So ShotScope is doing the same thing we're starting to see from a number of other golf brands, and that is building out their full ecosystem. They have GPS units, they have shot tracking, they have rangefinders, and now they have a launch monitor. So the idea is that all within one app in one ecosystem, you can get all of your on-course data, you can get your practice data, you can get yardages, you can get everything you need to fully enhance your golf experience. The thing that's different about ShotScope is that they're doing it for way less money than most other brands. So ShotScope is definitely, in my opinion, kind of the budget golf tech brand. I've had mixed opinions about a lot of their products over the years because in my experience, in most cases, there's usually another product that does things a little bit to a lot better for not necessarily that much more money. There are exceptions to this. Their Pro L2 rangefinder, which you can often find on sale for way under $150, is my best budget pick for a budget rangefinder. If you're into shot tracking, but you don't want the subscription that comes along with Arccos, their X5 and their V3 systems are totally serviceable. Not as good as Arccos, not as good as Garmin, but very good for the price. But now to see them come out with a launch monitor that is not just a little bit less than the competition, but significantly less at only $200, well, that gets my attention, and so I've been very excited to get this thing and put it through its paces to see how it actually works and if it's worth buying. My first impressions out of the box are that it looks like a ShotScope product. They're not doing anything overly fancy with the packaging, and I don't think they need to, especially not for $199. The device itself is very portable. It's actually smaller than I expected it to be. Build quality is fine. It's kind of what you would expect for a $200 product. The plastic construction doesn't feel overly high-end. The stand is, relatively cheap feeling, but also, what do you expect for $199? Everything about it is super serviceable. It looks good. I like the design, and with something like this, I don't think durability is going to be a huge issue. It's not like you're gonna be like throwing this thing around. So I think that the construction for what it is totally fine. One nice thing that was included that I wasn't expecting at this price point is the fact it has a carrying case. So it's got actually a very nice carrying case with space for a charging cable in here. There's a lot of golf launch monitors that cost significantly more than this that don't come with the case. I look at the Voice Caddy SC4 Pro. You've got to spend an extra like $50 or something to get a case for that on a device that costs 3 times as much. So the fact they included a case at this price point, I think is really nice. They also include a USB-A to USB-C charging cord. I thought it was a little weird that they used A to C as opposed to a C to C cord, which would be kind of the most modern standard. But again, most of us still have charging bricks for those older USB-As or dongles to connect to your computer, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for most people, but I was kind of surprised to see that was the cord that was included. As far as battery life goes, this thing is rated for 5 hours. I've personally run into no battery life issues, so that 5-hour number feels correct, and that should be plenty long for even the most in-depth range session. So overall, first impressions, really solid. Build quality, construction, packaging, certainly everything is as good as I was expecting, if not even a little bit nicer than I was expecting considering its price point. So now with that, let's talk setup, first shots, and what you are actually going to get out of this launch monitor. So one of the great things about this device, this is a Doppler device, which means it's actually going to track the ball using radar as opposed to some launch monitors which use high-speed cameras to track the ball. Because of this is going to be best suited to use outdoor on a range. You can use it inside, which I've tested out a little bit inside, and the results vary a little bit more inside. So if you're planning to primarily use this inside in a garage into a net or something like that, you might consider some other models, but if you're just planning to do that occasionally, then this is going to be totally serviceable. But for the purposes of this review, this is mostly looking at numbers that were used outside on a range. One of the nice things about this particular unit is setup is so easy. So you're going to find 5 metrics with this device. You're going to have total distance, carry distance, ball speed, club speed, and smash factor. That is it. So it's not trying to be like a lot of these other launch monitors that are providing, 20 plus metrics, and I think that that is actually a good thing. Because what you typically find with a lot of those other models, especially when we're talking about budget models under say $1,000, is that they're only actually measuring 4 to 5 of those different metrics, and then it's taking that information and using an algorithm to calculate what it thinks is going to be the correct numbers for all those other metrics. Now, a lot of these devices do a pretty good job of getting close, but some of them, well, they don't. And so the fact that ShotScope says, look, we know that we can accurately measure these particular metrics. So we're gonna give you that, and we're not gonna try and guess and do anything crazy to just add in more metrics for marketing's sake. They wanted to make sure this thing was actually useful and accurate, and so I think the fact they only included 5 metrics is a good thing, but we'll talk about whether or not it's actually accurate as we get further into this review. Along with that, one thing this does not have is any sort of lateral or dispersion data. So because of this, you're not gonna be able to see which direction you're actually hitting the ball, either on the device or in the app. One of the nice things about this is it makes setup a whole lot easier. With other devices that do track dispersion, your alignment is going to be much more important. You've got to make sure you've got everything lined up just right so that it actually knows what direction you're hitting the ball. With this, you can pretty much pop open the stand, turn it on, set it 5 feet behind you, and away you go. Within 30 seconds, you are good to go in getting numbers with this device. Using it, I will say the screen quality is fine. It's not great. It's certainly not the sharpest or the brightest screen that I've ever seen. But again, this is a device that costs under $200. If you're finding yourself practicing in really bright sunlight, then there's definitely times where it may be a little bit hard to see because the screen is relatively small. And like I said, it's not the absolute brightest that I've seen. But under most normal usage situations, it's going to be perfectly serviceable. And in my testing so far, I haven't had any situations where legibility and be able to see the screen was an issue at all. One thing I've found that's kind of an issue with all launch monitors, but especially Doppler ones, comes down to positioning on the range. So every range is a little bit different. Some are totally flat in grass. Some you've got mats that are raised up an inch. Some have a lot of metal around you. And so the environment where you're playing could definitely have an impact on this or any other Doppler device. Like I said, they recommend 5 feet behind the ball. Where I was testing, we have mats, and then it's kind of like a drop off from there. So what I found was the mat was just big enough that I could put this all the way on the very back edge of the mat, and then I could move all the way up to the front to give me that 5 feet of space. It was pretty close, but doing that did work. So just think about where you're going to be using this and what that setup might look like. Again, if you're going to a range that maybe has multiple floors and a whole bunch of metal around you, sometimes that metal can interfere with the Doppler radar. So just be aware that performance is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all situation. It's really going to depend on your environment and your unique setup. As far as actually using the device, you have 4 buttons down the side. You have a power button, an up-down button, and a back button. So there is no remote that comes with this, which is honestly one of the things that I missed compared to like the Voice Caddy SC4 Pro, which again is a lot more expensive. But if you want to tell it what club you're using to then have to like go down, pick it up, scroll through, go back, it's a little bit cumbersome. It's a little bit annoying as opposed to some other devices where they have a remote, or you can do it automatically within the app, or you can do it on an Apple Watch. This, you pretty much have to go down. You have to use the menu system. So it works, it's fine, but it's definitely not the most convenient situation I've used with a launch monitor. When you get started, there are 3 different modes you can use when you're using this device. So the first mode is the one that most people are going to use most frequently, and that is practice range. That's just what you're going to use when you're out on the range. The second is for speed training. So if you're trying to up your swing speed, say you're using like the stack system or something like that, this will be able to measure your club head speed without hitting a ball. So this is a really convenient thing if you want to work on like speed training when you're at home and you're not able to get out to the course. This device will actually be able to help you. And then the third mode is on course. So I've gotten this question way more than I would expected. Every year I get a few dozen people that ask the question, what is the best launch monitor to take with you out on the course? My answer inevitably is just, well, none of them really, because launch monitors aren't really built to take out onto the golf course. They're too cumbersome to use. There are a couple exceptions to this. The first is the brand new Garmin G82, which is half GPS, half launch monitor. That's really the first launch monitor I've tested where if you want something out on the course, this can actually kind of be useful out there. And the second is it is kind of this. While I don't think most people should do it, the fact that this is so light and portable, the fact that because it doesn't have that lateral data, you don't have to do a whole lot of alignment when you're getting started. So you can pretty much turn it on, open it up, set it behind you on the tee, and actually pretty quickly get numbers. There aren't really that many other launch monitors where that's the case. And so if you're one of those people that's looking for a launch monitor that you can take out on the course, this might be something to consider. I personally would say go get like a GPS that can just track your shot distance. Realistically, probably gonna be more accurate because it's going to start tracking where you hit the ball, and you're gonna walk up and then you'll be able to look down and see, okay, I hit that drive 250 yards. I think that's probably a more elegant solution than taking this out on the course, but all that to say, there's a mode for it and you can do it if that's something you're looking for. Hey, real quick, I just want to take a second. Are you subscribed? If you have found this even a little valuable or a little entertaining, that is the absolute best thing you can do to help me grow this channel and allow me to continue to make unbiased reviews like these. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you could do that right now. Thank you, I appreciate you. Back to the video. Okay, so how does this thing actually perform and is it accurate? Well, the short answer is Yeah, it was surprisingly accurate. My experience with it has been better than I expected it to be. That is not to say it's perfect by any means, as we'll talk about, but overall, I would say the accuracy is remarkably good for a product that's $199. That's the thing we have to keep coming back to with this device. I'm going to have some critiques that I'm going to share. This remains remarkably solid, and it's clear to see why there's been so much hype around it. But getting back to accuracy, to test this, I put it up against my Bushnell Launch Pro. So I would say that's the most accurate launch monitor I own. It's essentially the same as a $7,000 Foresight GC3, and I wanted to get a sense of like how the numbers matched up. Now, something to be aware of here is the Launch Pro is an optical unit, and this is a Doppler unit. So this is actually tracking what the ball is doing on the range, whereas the Launch Pro is going to look at exactly what happens at impact, and then it's going to give you its numbers from there. Why is this important? Well, for one, environmental considerations. So one of the days I was testing this was kind of a windy day. It was probably a 1 to 2 club wind. And so what you'll find with the Launch Pro is that unless I go into the app and make some adjustments for environmental concerns, it's not going to give me an accurate number for ball flight because it's not taking the wind into consideration. A while back when I went down to San Diego for a full swing kit event where they were testing the accuracy of the full swing kit, they put it up against a GC Quad and a TrackMan. And the kit measured extremely well next to a TrackMan, whereas the GC Quad, which is a $20,000 launch monitor, was significantly different because it wasn't taking into account wind, and that was like a 3-club wind day. So the numbers were actually pretty dramatically different. So I say all this just to give you a little knowledge and perspective because we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. That being said, when it comes to ball speed and club speed, those metrics are a little bit more apples to apples, and this performed fantastically against the Launch Pro. In almost every case, from wedges to irons to driver, both ball speed and club speed were within 1 to 2 miles per hour across the board. There'd be a few variances here and there, but overall, by and large, those two metrics were very similar to the much more expensive unit. Okay, so now let's talk about carry distance, because for most people, that is going to be the most important number. For me, total distance, I don't really put much stock into, or I don't really care that much about on any launch monitor, because the reality is every single launch monitor is using a different algorithm to calculate total distance. Once the ball hits the ground, none of these are tracking it anymore. So if you're playing a really muddy course and the ball just sticks into the fairway, well, that's obviously going to be different than if you're playing a links course that's playing firm and fast. And so anytime you're seeing total distance on a launch monitor, take it into account, consider it, but don't take it as a be-all, end-all number, because no matter what, it's still just an estimation. So with launch monitors, carry distance is going to be a much better number to look at. With my wedges, gap wedge, sand wedge, pitching wedge, I found the numbers to be pretty good. I found them to be within like 2 to 3 yards of the Launch Pro under most circumstances. I did find a little bit more variability on the highest shots. Like if I threw it way up there with the sand wedge, it did seem to provide more variable numbers than what I got with the Launch Pro. And that's honestly not a huge surprise. Really high shots, little chip and pitch shots, or any shot that's like mishit or significantly offline, that's where you're going to find a lot more variability with some of these less expensive units. And I've definitely found that to be the case with the LM1. Overall, wedge performance was still solid. As I worked from my sand wedge to gap wedge to pitching wedge, we've reduced that trajectory a little bit. That's where I found the numbers to get even more accurate. And like I said, they were typically anywhere from like a 1 to 3 yard difference from what I was getting with the Launch Pro. If it was really high or there was a gust of wind like we talked about, the numbers wouldn't match up. But with these tests, I wasn't just relying on that. I was also lasering flag sticks, and I generally have a pretty good idea of how far all of my clubs go. And overall, while it wasn't perfect, the wedge performance with the LM1 was pretty good. Where I found the LM1 to really hit its stride was with irons. Basically all the way from 4 to 9 iron, club speed, ball speed, very, very good. Like I said, right in line with what I was seeing on the Launch Pro, and carry numbers across the board really seemed pretty dead on with irons. I feel like irons are really the sweet spot for the LM1. You've got swing speeds that are high enough to get a good amount of data, so you're not hitting like little pitch shots and everything, but they're not getting so high where it gets harder to track like you're going to find with the driver. But across the board, iron accuracy was very, very good. I was especially surprised to see how good it was with 4 and 5 irons. Like I said, the carry numbers on those were within 3 yards of what I was seeing with the Launch Pro. And again, knowing my numbers, lasering those flags, everything else I was doing to test it seemed to support this. Where you then start to run into a little more variability comes with drivers and woods. As most of us know, once we get into those longer clubs, especially for less expensive units with much smaller Doppler radar systems, that just gets a little bit harder to track. I'd say probably 60% of my drives with the LM1 were right in line with what I saw with the Launch Pro. Very similar club speed, ball speed, and carry distances that were within about 3 to 5 yards in most circumstances. The other 40%, I have seen a little bit more variability. This was the one area where I saw club and ball speeds vary a fair amount more, occasionally like 2 to 4 miles per hour difference. There were definitely some shots where we saw a wider variability in terms of carry numbers. Sometimes those were as high as 7 to 10, if not even a little bit more occasionally on some shots. I didn't see it as much on well-struck shots. Like if I basically hit it straight or had like a little bit of a fade or a little bit of a draw, those numbers typically seem to be pretty good. But as soon as I have any sort of like mishit or a big slice or anything like that, that's where the numbers kind of go way off. But the reality is, for a device like this and the way you use it, if you have that big slice, you're probably not going to care about that number that much anyway. That's kind of a throwaway shot, mishit, all right, move on to the next one. It's like what you really want to know is like on the shots you hit well, what are those numbers? And typically, for the most part, the numbers for well-hit shots were within a range that I was comfortable with. I would say the carry distance with driver on those perfect shots was usually between like 3 to 7 yards. You know, you'd have some that were dead on, some that had a little bit more variability. So while it's not quite as reliable with driver, for $200, it's good enough to actually be useful. You'll generally have a pretty good idea whether or not the number is in the right ballpark. And to be that accurate with most of the clubs in the bag under most circumstances for $199, there's not really a product out there that can compete with that. I've tested the PRGR, which is a $230 launch monitor. It's got a small built-in screen. I've talked to people that have had good experiences with that and like it for a budget device. The times I've tested that, I've honestly not been a fan. I have not been able to get very reliable numbers out of it. Whereas with the ShotScope, my experience has been much better, it's been more reliable, and even though it's not perfect, it's less money and it gave me better results than the PRGR. So if you're comparing between those two, I would definitely lean towards the ShotScope. So all that to say, accuracy outdoors on a range, for the most part, is very good considering its price, and honestly, it's very good when you compare it to products that are even more expensive. So if accuracy's been your concern, as long as you're setting proper expectations for a $200 launch monitor, I think you're gonna find it plenty accurate enough to basically be what you want it to be, give you some solid numbers on the range, and make practice more fun. But now that we've said all that, there is one thing that I have been pretty disappointed with the LM1, and that comes down to the app experience. So when I first heard that for this price, not only is it gonna have a built-in screen, not only is it theoretically going to be accurate, but it's also going to be able to be paired with the ShotScope app, I was like, man, that is pretty insane. But once you start using the app and you realize what the app can actually do, you start to realize, okay, I should have tempered my expectations a little bit. It wasn't quite the dream that I thought it was going to be. And so what I mean by that is, in most cases where you have a launch monitor and an app, you can use it real time. So it'll give you the same data that you got on the screen in real time on the app. Many of those will also have a virtual range. Many of those can also use, say, E6 to provide some simulator access. This doesn't do any of that. So it's not going to give you data in real time. There's no virtual range. There's nothing that's going to give you live data while you're practicing. But after your session, after you pair it with the app, it will have every single shot and the data associated with it from that practice session. Now, in theory, that's pretty cool. But in reality, there's not much you can do with the data. So I can go in and I can see every shot that I hit, and I can see what the distance was and my ball speed and all of that. And it's kind of useful for getting averages. If I want to see the average numbers around, say, my 7-iron, I can do that, and that's somewhat useful. But there's not really any meaningful way to sort the data or get charts or graphics or do anything outside of just having the numbers there. Like even basic, like being nice to like star shots that were particularly good. As far as I know, you can't do that within the app. Honestly, it feels like this was a little bit of an afterthought, a little bit of a tack on. It uses the ShotScope Golf app that all of their other devices use, but even when I opened up the app, it took me a minute or two to figure out where to go to even get my data. Hint, you select rounds and then you select sessions, and that will show you your practice data. But it wasn't the most intuitive, it wasn't the most user-friendly, and honestly, in most circumstances, for me using this, I wouldn't even bother setting up the app. I would just use it out on the range, have the built-in screen, simplify everything, until they add more features to make that more useful. I just don't see a huge benefit to it. But keep in mind, this is their first launch monitor, and this is a product that just came out. So I have no doubt that they're going to continue to improve the product and the app in the coming months. But I go back and think about the original FlightScope Mevo. So similar in the sense that it had no lateral data, it had a few extra metrics, it had spin and a few other things like that. But considering that device didn't have a screen, it had to use the app in real time. Along with that, you could kind of ignore the app if you have an Apple Watch. You can get all of your metrics on your Apple Watch, you can switch clubs on your Apple Watch. It was super nice and super convenient. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, we might see them them expand that out to add more features and make it more useful. But right now, if one of the major reasons you're thinking about buying this is for that app experience, I might reset your expectations a little bit. So all that to say, should you buy the ShotScope LM1? Well, if it seems like this is what you're looking for, if you want a reasonably accurate, very easy to use launch monitor to get basic carry distance when you're out on the range, then by all means, this absolutely lives up to the promise that it makes. If you're looking for an indoor simulator that's gonna have a whole bunch of features and a robust app, then this is probably not for you. It's gonna be worth spending a little bit more money to get something that's more designed for that. But as it sits right now, there is no product out there that even comes close for $200 when you compare it to the ShotScope. Whether you're looking at the built-in screen or the fact it's just really accurate for the price, honestly, this not only lived up to, but I would say exceeded my expectations in most of the ways that matter. The only major disappointment I had was that app experience, but when it came to accuracy, usability, and basically doing the primary things they set out to accomplish with this, I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park. With that, my name is Sean Ogle. I'm the founder of this thing here at Breaking 80, where we talk about cool golf products and cool golf courses. If you're still not sure which launch monitor is right for you, go take our 30-second quiz. You're gonna answer a few questions around what you're looking for, and I'm gonna give you my best recommendation based on the device that's the best fit for your needs. If you want my full take on all the best launch monitors out there and which ones are best for different use cases, indoors, outdoors, expensive, cheap, then I will link to that post below as well. And if you have any questions around this, feel free to drop a comment and I will do my best to answer every single one. With that, I hope you have an excellent day and we'll see you on the next video. Peace.